But as we continue in this series about when God speaks, we've been focused mainly in the Old Testament, where we looked at the ways that God speaks, but also the really different ways that God speaks. And the goal of this is to teach us that there's no box or one way that God speaks to us. Just because he speaks to you one way does not mean that he's going to speak to me in the same way. If we're being honest, we all have different ways that we communicate. We all have different ways that, when it comes to listening skills, everybody's listening skills and the way you grab people's attention, it's different for everybody. And so God will use the means that works for you to get your attention and to speak to you. And I believe that's what we see in Scripture, is he speaks to each of these individuals, starting with Adam and Eve, in the ways that would catch their attention. With Moses, it was the burning bush. And I think that would catch a lot of our attention as well. Although for me, I don't know that I would go towards the burning bush. But his curiosity was enough that it led him to go and see, well, why is this bush on fire? But yet it's still standing and it's not falling apart. So today I want to go continue to look at Moses, but I want to look at the progression of when he first had that moment with God to what really it was like for him as he led the Israelites to the wilderness. And how he changed over time during his time of leading the Israelites, where he went from questioning and telling God, like, I can't do this. You're gonna have to send somebody with me. I can't speak. I can't do this and do that. To by the time he died, he didn't have any of those issues when it came to standing up to the Israelites and speaking what God told him to speak. He was at the point where the more time he spent in God's presence, I believe the more confident he got, not only in his abilities, but in being able to be a vessel for God. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the ways that not only was God involved in speaking to Moses as he led, but he also he was very involved in leading the Israelites through the desert. And so we're going to be jumping around quite a bit because there's a lot of different scriptures to cover. So if anything, it's going to feel like we're about to go through the whole book of Exodus within the next couple of 30 to 40 minutes. So I promise you I'm not going to read every single chapter. We don't have enough time for that. But each portion that I pull out are areas where God played a part or was involved in what was happening as the Israelites wandered through the desert. Now, the thing about it is when they first came out of Egypt and God began to lead them and they got to the Red Sea, it says that he chose to lead them around so that they couldn't see the things that were going on in the countries and the places around them, because he didn't want them to be afraid, because there was wars and all sorts of different things going on, and so he didn't want them to want to turn back because they saw the obstacles ahead by going through these countries. So he decided to take them a longer way around. Now, it was not God's plan to have them wander the desert for 40 years. Anybody remember why they ended up wandering the desert for 40 years? Yeah. Right. So God had promised them that they were going to inherit this land. And he had already shown that he keeps his word by bringing them out of slavery and rescuing them, but also by really destroying the Pharaoh and all the chariots that were chasing after them. So God has already shown that he can give them victory. But when they sent the 12 to go and scout the place, 10 of them said, no, we can't do that. There's no way we're going to be able to take it. Only 2 of them, which was Caleb and Joshua, that says, we can do this. And so I think their response, sometimes I think we give a hard time because of the way we responded, because we're reading the story. It's like, well, it just makes sense. Why would you react the way you did after you saw God do the things he does? But don't we do something similar? When the noises and the negativity drowns out all the good that God has done, we don't first go to, man, I remember when God did this for me. We go, man, this looks impossible. God, there's no way out of this problem. So just like the Israelites, instead of looking for the positive, the blessings and the goodness and focusing on the goodness, we tend to go to the negative and allow it to drown out all that God has done in our lives. And so we can't really say that we would not react the same way, because if you go, for those of us who like math, if you send 12 people in, and only 2 of the out of the 12 says we have a chance, when you do the math, you go, well, the percentage is not good. That's a very low percentage. So that means that even though we have a lot of people, that what they're saying is the people that are in this land, they look stronger, more prepared, because remember, they weren't really trained fighters. They were coming out of being enslaved, which means they were coming out of a position where they really didn't have any control. They didn't have weapons and things like that. They weren't ready, at least in that, they didn't feel like they were ready to go take on another nation. So they've had to trust and rely solely on God to fight their battles. So when we look at that and we pause, it's easy to see why, when they looked at it and heard the report of 10 out of the 12 that says, these people are giants, these people look really strong, like we can't do this. It's easy to see why they would focus, why that would be what caught their attention. Because as I said before, we do the same things. When I look back at the last month, when I tell you it's been a month, it's been a month. We've had stomach virus in our household. My kids have had ear infections. In fact, at one point, Janika had it in both ears, while Karis had already had it in one ear. Now she has it in the other one. We've had head lice in our household. Like, it's just been one thing after another after another. And when I look at all those things, I couldn't help but want to go, God, why is all this happening? It's hard not to focus on all the negatives and all the things that are going wrong. And so I had to be intentional in being intentional in saying, Lord, I trust you. Lord, I know you're going to make a way. Lord, I know you got this, even though I don't know how, even though this looks awful and I hate it. Like, I just want a break. Like, it felt like either something was happening at home or something was happening at church. If you haven't noticed in the bathrooms, I've had to pay to have the urinal in there fixed, because one day it was leaking in there. Turns out, from the inside of the wall, it was cracked. So the evening that we had the worship night, I had somebody back there working on it to get it ready so that we could have usage of the bathroom for Sunday morning. Like, that's the kind of weeks that I've been having. And then the bathroom in the nursery had to be replaced completely. It's just been one thing after another. I'm looking at God. I'm like, Lord, why? Like, can I just have 1 week of just everything going smooth, no problems, no headaches, no nothing? But then I had to stop and go, man, had these things happened during my first year here, we would not have been able to afford to get them fixed immediately. But because God has been good to us, because He has blessed us and increased our finances, I was able to actually get those things taken care of immediately. Sometimes you have to pause and look for the ways that God has already been working or has been working. So when we look at starting at Exodus 13, verse 21, 22, it tells us how God went before them, by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, and that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. Now, when we talked about Moses and some of the things that God used him for, like parting of the Red Sea, if you remember, one of the things that God did was, it says that the angel that was before them actually went behind them and basically blocked the way so that the Egyptians could not get close to them. And so as they move, it says that no matter how far they went, the distance remained the same, that the Egyptians could not get close because God would not allow it to happen. So God was playing his part in not only rescue him and them out of Egypt, but he allowed an angel to be the one that lead them. When we rely on God to be the one that leads our way, to be the one that takes us where we need to go, the experience is a whole lot different. Like, I like to picture that moment. Like, what did it look like to have a pillar of cloud that leads you along the way, and then at nighttime a pillar of fire? Can you imagine going to bed and you knowing that, man, right in the midst of our camp, the presence of God is right there? When they woke up the next day, the presence of God was still there. That's, to me, that's an amazing thing. And while we may not have the pillar of fire, but the presence of God is still present with us today. But if we don't spend enough time with him and draw close to him, we won't know or recognize his presence because we won't know what it feels like when his presence is with us. See, the Lord said, it says that the Lord issued a ruling and instruction for them and put them to the test. If you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. Now, God, it says that he issued a ruling and gives them instruction, but it was also a test, putting them to the test. They telling them, all you have to do is be obedient and do what is right in my eyes. All you have to do is follow what I've set for you and do what I've called you to do. Remember, he had chosen them to be set apart. He had chosen them to be his people, to be the ones that showcase his glory, so that by bringing them out of Egypt, that people would see the goodness of God. That's why when God said, when he got tired of the Israelites complaining, Moses reminded him, listen, if you get rid of them, then how will people know that, people are going to question, well, why did you bring them out of Egypt if you were just going to kill them anyways? Many times Moses would go on their behalf before the Lord and ask God to basically don't punish them. Which is very interesting because this is the same Moses that told God that he's tongue-tied. He can't speak very well. There's a lot of things that he can't do. The same Moses that needed Aaron to be the one that spoke for him. Felt confident enough to say to God, listen, you don't do that. If you do this, people are going to wonder why you even brought them out of where they were. See, there's a lot we can learn from Moses in his relationship with God. And what it shows us when we look at the book of Exodus, when we look at his life and him leading Israelites, we see what it looks like when the leader has a strong relationship with God. when they follow to the decree whatever God says, everything that they did was according to the rhythm of God. Meaning, when they got up in the morning, if that cloud did not move, nobody moved. If the clouds started leading and they had to, it just kept going for 1 day, 2 days, and it would keep going for that however length of time that the cloud was moving. When the cloud stopped for a day, 2, 3, a week, everybody stopped and stayed wherever the cloud stopped. Think about that concept for a second when it comes to our mindset, when we like to have things and we like to do things on our own schedules. Can you imagine what it would have been like if we had been in their places? We have our own plans of places that we want to be. Like, we want to get to our destination, so, like, God, can you just hurry it up along so we can get to where we're going? But they had to follow him completely. Now imagine if the church lived that way today. That everything that we did, if God did not say do it or give the go-ahead, we would not go ahead and do it. If God is not a part of it, basically, if we don't go to God first and seek him for whatever plans we have or things that we're trying to do, if he says no, we don't fight it, we just accept it and keep going. If the things that we want to do, God's presence is not in it, then why do we do it? What is the point behind it? Because ultimately, it's supposed to bring God glory. So if he didn't want anything to do with it, who is getting the glory when you do something that he did not ask of you to do? See, many people will do things thinking that they're doing it for God, but in reality, he never asked them to do it. Just because you do a good thing does not mean that it was the thing that God asked you to do. It's just that you wanted to do something, and rather than seeking God's presence and asking him what it is that he wants you to do, you decide to do what you want to do. See, I believe that's something that not just everybody can fall into that, but especially as leaders, if you're not careful, you can do as much as you want thinking that you're doing things for God, but in reality, you're just doing things thinking you're doing them to earn his favor. See, that's why a lot of people sometimes, especially in ministry, can get tied to the work that they're doing and it becomes their identity. And it becomes a thing that fills a hole. And so somewhere along the way, rather than doing ministry with God, it's you just doing ministry. And you just do the things you do because that's just what you do. You lose the love that you have for God. You lose the love that you first had for the ministry that he called you to. Because somewhere along the ways, the trials, all the things that comes along with the work of ministry, it wears on you. So we have to be careful that we make sure that God's presence is always a part of the things that we do. But rather, not only that, if his presence is not in it, then we don't need to do it. In Exodus 16, we see God provide for the Israelites. Now, because of their disobedience and because they chose to agree with the 10, God basically told them they were going to wander the desert for 40 years. He said that whole generation that older generation was going to die out, and the ones that were going to go were the younger generation. I think it was like the 20s and under, if I remember correctly. In other words, So that way, the generation that would go into the promised land would not have the negativity that the older one had. See, the older ones, they had experienced so much hurt and pain and all these different things that it's just not being able to get to the promised land fast enough and all these different things that were happening. Every time things weren't going right, they would look back to the life that they used to have. Even though it was filled with pain, somehow they would find focus on some of the good stuff. And so they complained a lot to Moses and to God. And so God provided for them by giving them manna and quail, which manna literally means, what is it? And then in Exodus 19, this one I'm going to read, starting in verse 3, it says, Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourself have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully, keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the word the Lord had commanded them to speak. The people all responded together, We will do everything the Lord has said. So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, I am going to come to you in a dense cloud so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you. Then Moses told the Lord what the people had said. So Moses basically, God, he's his messenger, and he takes this message to the people. And they agree and say that they're going to be obedient. They'll do everything that the Lord says. And so God said to Moses, I'm going to come down from this mountain, and I'm going to speak to you in an audible way that they will all hear my voice. In other words, he's going to come down not only to speak to them and so that they hear his voice, but so that they know that he's the one who has appointed Moses over them. He says, so then they will always put their trust in you. In other words, that they know that they can trust what you say because they will know that God is the one saying it. God is the one that's giving you these messages to bring to the people. And so if you scroll down to verse 16 through 21, God does just that. But first he had them consecrate themselves, which means that they had to make sure that they were clean. There are certain things that they have to do to make sure that when they come before the presence of God, that they weren't uncleaned. Because if they got too close to the space where God had come down, they would die immediately. Then God would later go on to give him the 10 Commandments, which he carved with his own hands the first time. The second time, he made Moses write them. In Exodus 33, and this one I think is something that we should all resonate and really take with us, where Moses speaks to God. He says, You have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You've said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you're pleased with me, teach me your ways, so I may know you and continue to find favor with you. The Lord responded, My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. And then Moses said to him, If your presence does not go with us, do not send us from here. I think that should be something that we all take and bring to God. If your presence is not with me, God, don't let me step foot into the store, or don't let me step foot out of the house without your presence. God, when I walk into my workplace, let your presence be with me. When I encounter people at the store or wherever it may be that I go, God, may your presence be with me. See, Moses had gotten so used to being that close with God that he didn't want to be without his presence. Is that true for us today? When you look at your day, you look at your week, how many of us, when we woke up to go to work, to go to church, to go wherever, did you ask God that his presence would go with you? I didn't. I'm just being honest. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I'm thinking is, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, I got to make sure I have this. And then I get here, I'm like, oh, I better make sure I turn that on. Oh, that's not working. This is not working. And so by the time you really get your morning going, sometimes you're not always thinking that way. So it's time that we change that mindset to where we make sure that we make God first and ask him to fill us with his presence each and every day. So that when we leave our house, when we walk out the door, his presence would be with us. When we enter into a room, that whether there's believers or non-believers, they would recognize there is something different that has entered into this room. If we desire his presence and we go after it and we seek it, I believe he will do just that. He will go with us. He said that to Moses, my presence will go with you. And we can experience that too. When Jesus gave the Great Commission, he told us that he would be with us. But how many of us tend to leave Jesus a little, behind when we get really busy? Sometimes I think what people try to do is they try to separate their life, their worlds. I have Jesus on Sunday, maybe on Wednesday, but when I step foot into the workplace or wherever I go, I got to be a different person because, people are mean, rude. But we are to take him with us everywhere. That's what's supposed to set us apart from everybody else, from the world, that we're not trying to be like everyone else. So to walk with Christ means that wherever we go, he is with us. Which means you can't pick and choose when you're a follower. You can't pick and choose when you're going to have Jesus be a part of your conversations. You can't pick and choose when Jesus can be in the room with you. It just doesn't work that way. But that's what a lot of people do. They act one way in church, and then when they're around other people, they forgot that they're a Christian. And so they act a completely different way. That's a double standard. We're not called to be in the world just to be in the world. You can't just say, on Monday and Tuesday, I got to be what I got to be to make it through the day. But once I leave, Jesus, we're good. We're back on track. Now more than ever, we need people to stand for God. Now more than ever, people need to actually stand on their faith. Like, I don't spend a lot of time on, social media, but every once in a while I get on there, and boy, sometimes I question humanity because what I see is like whether it be Christians or non-Christians, and the way people treat each other, it just blows me away. And the parts that really strikes me and hurts my heart is when it's a believer that's doing it. When it's somebody that says that they're a Christian, but yet they're spreading a lot of negativity and hate. And then you can't help but wonder, are you truly a Christian, or are you only selective when you can be a Christian? See, I don't know everybody's story, but I know that when I read my Bible, when I read the Word, the things that I see in the way that people act, they don't line up with what I read and how a believer is supposed to act. And so we have to make sure that we are different. And the only way that we can make sure that we're different is to make sure that we're following the ways of God. See, just like Moses told the Lord, he says, "Teach me your ways so that I may know you." That's what we want, is to know God, to know more of him, which means that we have to learn his way. We have to do things his way. So when we read the word and it calls for us to be compassionate, long suffering, we don't get to choose when we're going to be those things. We don't get to decide who deserves to receive compassion and love, patience, joy, forgiveness. We don't get to choose when to do those things, because if God had been picky about when we should receive forgiveness or who should receive forgiveness, can we honestly say that we would have been on his, I don't want to go Santa Claus here, but on his nice list? Like, can we honestly say that we would have been on the nice list? I don't know about you, but I can't honestly say that I would be on the nice list. But yet he saw us as deserving of his love in the sacrifice of sending his son to die for all of us. So that he would get the glory. It's not about us, but so that he would receive the glory and bring us back to him. Bring us back into a right relationship with him. Last thing that I noticed as I read about Moses' relationship with God is that he had spent so much time going up and down that mountain, being in the presence of God. There was an outward effect. In fact, in chapter 34 of Exodus, it says, when Moses, starting in verse 39, it says, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the covenant law in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. And when Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, his face was radiant, and they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, so Aaron and all the leaders of the community came back to him, and he spoke to them. Afterward, all the Israelites came near him, and he gave them all the commands the Lord had given him on Mount Sinai. When Moses finished speaking to them, he put a veil over his face. But whenever he entered the Lord's presence to speak with him, he removed the veil until he came out. And when he came out and told the Israelite what he had been commanded, they saw that his face was radiant. Then Moses would put the veil back over his face until he went in to speak with the Lord. Imagine being that close to God, that there was an outward effect that showed people, man, this person had been close to God. So much so that they were afraid to come near him. Now, while our faces may not shine brightly like Moses, but there should be an outward effect of how close we are to God. The more time we spend with him, the more we become like him, the more it should reflect outwardly to people. So my question for you today is, do you reflect God outwardly to the world? When people come into your circle, do they know that you're a believer? Do they know that you're a follower of Christ just based off of that encounter? Or do they just assume you just like everybody else until they later find out that you are a Christian, and then the demeanors change a little bit? But we should desire to have that level of intimacy and closeness with the Father. That not only would his presence go with us, not only that he would teach us his ways, but that there would be an outward showing that we have spent time in the presence of God. So what needs to change for you to find time and make time for God? In what ways have you forgotten or maybe have lost sight of what it means to be in the presence of God? Have you made him a priority of your life daily, or just when you remember? I think we all need just to ask that God's presence would go with us each and every day. So my hope, my challenge for all of us this week, including myself, is that when you wake up in the morning, that you would ask God that his presence would go with you wherever you're going to go. That as you go through your day, whether things are going well or things are going bad, that you would be reminded and that you would again ask him, God, I don't know what's going on, but right now I need you. I need you to lead me today. I need you to guide me. I need you to be in the midst of this space that I'm in. So that when I respond, when I react, and whatever I do would be in a way that reflects you to people. See, I think if we ask God to go with us and his presence to be with us, it would change the way we respond to people and the way we act. Because we would stop responding with our flesh and actually seek him to lead our responses. See, the flesh, when you respond with the flesh, you can say a lot of things that sound good but aren't really God-honoring. But when you respond in the Spirit and allow God to be the one that leads your responses and give you the words to say, and you just trust that He's going to give you the words to say in those moments, then the conversation, the reaction, everything changes because you're not doing it for you. You're doing it to show honor to God. So the more time we spend in His presence, hopefully the more like Christ we become. Would you pray with me?